Clotheshorse is brought to you with support from the following sustainable brands. Selena Sanders, a social impact brand that specializes in upcycled clothing using only reclaimed vintage or thrifted materials, from tea towels, linens, blankets, and quilts. Sustainably crafted in Los Angeles, each piece is designed to last in one's closet for generations to come. Maximum style, minimal carbon footprint. Salt Hats, purveyors of truly sustainable hats, hand-blocked, sewn, and embellished in Detroit, Michigan. Gentle Vibes, a vintage shop for the psychedelic mind, formerly inside Jeans in Hamtramck with a new Detroit location coming soon. Picnicwear, a slow fashion brand made by hand in New York City from vintage and deadstock materials. Picnicwear strives for minimal waste but maximum authenticity. Future vintage over future garbage. No Flight Back Vintage, bringing fun, new life to old things. Always using recycled and secondhand materials to make dope-ass shit for dope-ass people. See more on Instagram at No Flight Back Vintage. Shift Clothing out of beautiful Astoria, Oregon, with a focus on natural fibers, simple, hardworking designs, and putting fat people first. Discover more at shiftwheeler.com. Late to the Party, creating one-of-a-kind statement clothing from vintage, salvaged, and thrifted textiles. They hope to tap into the dreamy memories we all hold. Floral curtains, a childhood dress, the wallpaper in your best friend's rec room, all while creating modern, sustainable garments that you'll love wearing and have for years to come. Late to the Party is passionate about celebrating and preserving textiles, the memories they hold, and the stories they have yet to tell. Check them out on Instagram at Late to the Party People. Vino Vintage, based just outside of LA. We love the hunt of shopping secondhand because you never know what you might find. Find our cute and sustainable fashion pics at the Silver Lake Flea and on Instagram at vino.vintage. And Shop Journal, upcycled, handmade, and vintage clothing and accessories. One woman owned and operated in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. They love details, bright colors, and everything extra. This month, they're donating to Fair Fight Action. Getting dressed should be fun. See more on Instagram at shop_journal. Welcome to Clotheshorse, the podcast that hates the idea of a brunch dress. Don't worry, I'll find out more later. I'm your host, Amanda. As always, today's episode is just jam-packed with excitement. It's the final part of our conversation with Gillian, and to be honest, I miss her already. We'll be talking about racy vintage Polaroids, $8 yogurt parfaits, and a very strong case for brunch as an analog for fast fashion. And our friend Jessica is here to tell us once and for all what's happening when we sell our clothes at Buffalo Exchange. But first, as always, it's time to thank our latest Patreon supporters. First is Caroline Cunningham. Now, as you know, I stalk all of you patrons to see what you're all about. And while I'm not 100% certain that I have the right Caroline here, I'm pretty sure, if I'm right, she has one of the cutest babies I've ever seen. Thank you for your support, Caroline. Next is Sonya Lucian, who I'm happy to say is a cat lady, my favorite kind of person. And she's part of the Orphan Kitten Club alongside the Kitten Lady. If you're not super into animals or the animal rescue scene, it might sound like I'm just arbitrarily stringing together cat-related words, which, to be fair, I have been known to do. But if you're like myself and you're really into animal rescue, then you know how honored I am to have Sonya as a patron. Thanks so much, Sonya. Also, I don't think I've mentioned this on the pod before, but actually my 100% dream job is to someday have an animal rescue of my own. I just love animals so much, and I've been volunteering in animal rescue since I was a teenager. It's just really, really important to me. And as I've mentioned, we have 3 cats here at Clotheshorse World headquarters. Brenda, we trapped her in our alley in Philadelphia. George, we trapped her Yes, it's a she. We trapped her in Portland. And Ray, we didn't trap him, but he is from the shelter there. And they're all the best cats ever. Anyway, back to patrons. Last but not least, our new friend, Sarah Dreer, who you might remember I talked to in the last episode about all of her different high school personas. She's a new Pegasus sponsor with her business, Wide-Eyed Vintage. Thank you so much, Sarah. Thank you for talking to me last week and for becoming a patron of Clotheshorse. If you would like to support the show and me via Patreon, you can find more information at patreon.com/clothehorsepodcast. And don't worry, I'll share a link in the show notes because who's like actively sitting and writing down that link right now? No one, right? This week, I released our first ever Patreon exclusive episode about Victoria's Secret. Well, Victoria's Secret as a metaphor or really just a literal example of how the industry is super out of touch because why? Because it's run by wealthy old white men. See, you want to hear all about that, right? Can I just say for a minute that my favorite thing about working on Clotheshorse is all of the amazing new friends I've made in an otherwise, lonely and frightening time. Y'all know what I'm talking about. And the most amazing part about it all to me is that you all like me as I am because I get to be fully my weird, nerdy self here on the pod and y'all still like me. It means so much to me. I say this a lot, but I grew up the weird, poor cancer kid who was good at math and way smaller than everyone else. And that sort of imposter syndrome got worse for me as I got older and went out into the world. And, I just met a lot of people who made me feel like I should never, ever reveal my true self to them. So it's almost like I'm starting this new stage in my life by just being myself and it being okay. And I hope all of you are starting to feel that way too during 2020. Like this can be the first year of the rest of our lives. Or, okay, maybe it would be better if it was the last year of our old lives and then 2021 was like the new year. I mean, because that kind of sounds like a better way to start your new life, right? Enough of all that feelings talk. Let's move on. Speaking of new friends, our new friend, Jessica of Vino Vintage, reached out to me a few weeks ago because she knew that we were all kind of wondering exactly how the Buffalo Exchange works. We've definitely brought this up a lot, right? She was kind enough to have a little phone call using the Clotheshorse hotline to answer all of my questions. And so this is a phone call. So once again, the sound quality will be a little different than usual. Well, I'm really excited to talk to you about your experience at Buffalo Exchange.
Yeah, I'm excited to tell you about it. I love the podcast. I'm a huge fan.
Thanks. Well, I'm glad you reached out to me. I was like, wow, finally, I'm going to get all the inside info that everyone wants to know.
Right. I know. I've heard you mention it a few times, and I was like, I'm just going to reach out because I like the show, and yeah, I'd be happy to tell you all the behind the scenes.
Why don't you start by telling us a little bit about, what you did at Buffalo Exchange, how long you worked there, why you're an expert.
Okay, yeah. So I worked there for about 2 years, from 2016 to 2018, so a couple years ago. And I started as a entry-level buyer is what they call it. So pretty much you buy or you get trained how to buy from like the public. You can also be a cashier, you can work in the fitting room, all that stuff. So it's kind of a wide range of things, but buyer was like your main title. And then from there, I went to associate manager. And then I did that for a couple months. And then my last position with the company was store manager.
Wow.
So everything. Yeah. I really loved it. But towards the end, it just different leadership. Like I got a new district manager and just was not good. So I'm just leaving, but I really learned a lot. I met a lot of great friends that I still talk to, to this day. So that was really cool.
That's the best thing about jobs like that. That's how I feel about all my retail time too. Like the best thing is all the friends who are still my friends that I met then. So how do you choose what you want to buy versus don't buy? Because I think a lot of people think it's arbitrary, and I know that's not true.
Yeah. So it's a little bit of both. I mean, if you asked me when I was working there, I would say no, like there's, so many like things about like training that we like do. We study like, trends and current fashions and what retailers are, have in their store currently and all that. And to a certain extent, it is true. There is a lot of like training that goes into it. But it is also can be pretty biased as far as like personal preference, whoever your buyer is, and all that. So pretty much like the main thing that they kind of start you with is like style of a brand. So is it a current style? And then also like the condition of the item, like how's that? And then you go from there as far as like pricing. But they're really big on like, knowing what current trends are out there. They pretty much want like what's in the malls right now, in their store too. So it's kind of like, I don't know, it's kind of hard because, people go and buy things like that they want to wear. And sometimes, you've covered this in the pod so many times, but, they wear it once and then they're over it. So that's really what Buffalo thrives on, is people who just wear things, brand new Top Shop dress or whatever. They wear it once for their birthday and then they just want to sell it, and you still buy it in the store, but now it's at Buffalo for half the original price and whatnot.
I mean, I'd never thought of that before, but you're 100% right.
Mm-hmm.
And that kind of like, it's like Buffalo Exchange succeeds when you just become addicted to fast fashion, basically.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely.
So when I was working retail, I can't say where, but it was in Portland. Mm-hmm. Sometimes people would come in from Buffalo Exchange and walk around and take a whole bunch of notes in a notebook. So what were they doing?
So they would go to your store and like take notes from, I see what you mean. So oftentimes they encourage, especially like new buyers, to do like, they have like official like documents. It's like a style trend report, or like there's another one I can't remember though, but like you literally go and like look at a style or like, I don't know, a trend, or like if it's like summer, like what's hot for summer, and like you literally go and take notes. And then you take it back to your store and like you show your store manager and they're like, oh my gosh, like this is great. This is what we need to buy. This is what, whatever Forever 21 has right now. So this is what we want. So that was probably it. And they're not really like, trying to like steal your company info, but it's more like, if we see this like at the buy counter and it's like, oh, it's a balloon sleeve, and like all these retailers have balloon sleeves, so we have to buy it then. So that's probably what it was.
Yeah, that's what I figured. People would get bent out of shape, and I'd be like, I think they're just studying for work. It's fine.
Yeah.
So something I've always wondered is, my greatest experience with Buffalo Exchange was in Portland, where like both stores were always super busy, both with like customers buying stuff and people selling stuff. Like always a line of people in line to sell. And I was always wondering, like, when you start each day, is there like a ceiling in the amount of stuff you're allowed to buy? Or and conversely, like, is there a minimum amount of stuff you need to buy in a day? Or is it just like, if it comes in and it's good, buy it. If it's not, don't?
Yeah. So there isn't really a cap, even because there would be some days where we would buy more than we would even sell. And like, you don't want to do it all the time, obviously, because you just don't have space for anything. But it was encouraged just because you never really knew how your selling or your buying days would be as far as like good inventory. Because you can have a lot of people coming in and trying to sell stuff, but if it wasn't like stuff you wanted, you would just, not buy anything from them. So the buy line was always open. They always were like encouraging people to come and sell, which was good. It was kind of, like a double-edged sword almost. Like, yeah, you need people to work the sales floor to like sell your merchandise, but you also need people to like be behind the buy counter to buy the stuff and turn it around quickly. So no, there was never a cap. At the end of the night, we would do like a percentage, like what are the dollar amount we bought versus the dollar amount we sold. And if it was under like a certain percent, then you were like good. If it was like either you sold whatever, $3,000 and you bought in, $2,000, you kind of wanted to the next day maybe even it out a little bit, but there was never like a cap or anything like that. No.
So how does the pricing work? Because it's like you've already opened my eyes to this idea that stuff that comes into the store ideally is stuff that's still like full price in the mall stores. Like, how do you determine the price? Do you as the buyer do that? Or, I mean, I know there's like computers there. I don't know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, definitely. Like, you as the buyer, you decide the price. So a lot of people do think that because, like, you're typing and they're like, what are they typing? Is there, like, a formula or something? But there's really not. All they're really typing is, like, your info, and then, like, they print the tag as, like, they're buying it in. So it's, like, simultaneous. So they're, like, typing in the price that they just want to put on the tag. But as far as, like, coming up with the price point, that's all on the buyer. So there is, like, tiers of, like, pricing that they, like, go over, like, with training and stuff. And, like, I think there was 4 tiers, maybe 5 if I remember correctly. But it was, like, tier 1 would be, like, your fast fashion, like, super cheap. And then 2 would be, like, your more moderate price point, and then so on and so forth. So usually, though, like, a good rule of thumb would be, like, if it, like, even had the original retail, like, tag on it, and let's say it retailed for $100,
Mm-hmm.
even us selling it at $50 would be considered, like, high price point for us. Unless it was, like, super desirable and, like really, like, brand new and we knew it was going to sell within, like, that day. But usually it would probably be, like, $30 would be, like, a safe price point that, like, would be fine at all the Buffaloes. So they try to, like, have it similar at all the Buffaloes, but, you know, they vary from, like, location to location. But yeah, a lot of people, you know, think, oh, I'm going to get, you know, X amount of dollars for this. I bought it for $100. I want at least 50. But, you know, if they priced it for 50, you only get back 30% cash of that or 50% store credit. So really, the people selling really aren't in it to make money. It's more just like you kind of get fast cash for your items. But yeah, the pricing is totally up to the person buying from you. Hopefully they know, like, the brands. A lot of times, like, especially new buyers, if they don't have a manager there or a trainer, they don't know the brand, they'll, like, underprice it, and then there'll be this whole, like, learning bar. They would call them on, like, why did you price like this? Where could we have, like, made more money on this, and just stuff like that. But yeah, no, they don't really just decide the price point right then.
That's so crazy. You must have to memorize so much stuff. I mean, I guess it probably gets easier over time, but that's like a hard job to just, like, start, you know?
Definitely, yeah. When I first started, I was like, oh, I know fashion. I love clothes, whatever. And then I started working there. I was like, oh, my gosh, I know nothing about all these brands that I'm supposed to know. And it was definitely, a wake-up call. Oh, my God, I don't know anything. Yeah.
I mean, like, there's so many stores, and you need to know how much stuff costs and, like, what they have in there right now. And, I mean, that brings me to the next question I have, because I would see this a lot, is the people who come in with, like, just IKEA bag after IKEA bag full of clothes. Like, isn't that annoying?
Totally. Well, it really depends on, like, the person. So I had a manager one time be like, oh, it's the millennial picker. And it would be like, you know, someone younger, like millennial age, and, like, just always the blue IKEA bag for some reason, no matter what, always a blue IKEA bag with, like, just a bunch of folded, like, vintage, like, mainly 90s, like, T-shirts and, like, more streetwear, which is totally cool. And, like, oftentimes we would buy it, but it was always funny. They'd always have the IKEA bag.
Always.
Every time it'd be like, oh, do you know what that is? Like, do you know that, like, brand? You know, like, you know, just all, like, every single piece was kind of funny. But, yes and no. If it was really good stuff that, like, you know, would sell really well, then it was more just like, oh, cool. If it was stuff that, like, you know, just Forever 21 stuff that, like, you know, like you talk about in the pod, that just, they washed it once and now they can't wear it. It's like, well, we don't want it either. If it was a lot of that, then it was, you know, just take a lot of time to look through everything. I think from what I've heard from one of my friends is they're more strict, especially with COVID now, on, like, how many bags you can bring in and, like, scheduling an appointment and all that. So I do think that's good, because it was hard on, like, the buyers to just, you know, buy, you know, the next customer just for hours, because they buy as long as they're open. So yes and no. Sometimes it was annoying, sometimes it was okay. But so much stuff. People have so many clothes.
I feel like so many times I went into the Buffalo Exchange in downtown Portland, and there would be someone in there trying to sell something who was, like, up to shady business. Like,
oh, definitely.
Trying to sell stolen stuff, or, like, I don't know. It was just always, there was always one person there who was up to no good.
Like a single jacket with the tag on it.
Yeah, exactly. And when I was working at another retail store that was sort of, like, up the street, you know, frequently people would come in, steal a whole bunch of stuff, and immediately just go down the street to Buffalo Exchange. And sometimes the Buffalo Exchange people would call us, or we would call them and be like, hey, this person's probably going to come in. This is what they have. And they would like seize the stuff for us, which is awesome.
Yeah, definitely.
You know? Did you ever have to deal with that kind of stuff?
Not directly, but there was definitely times where we would like turn stuff away if we were like suspicious, if it was just a weird situation, or if there was like sensors on some of the items, and that would be like a huge red flag.
Yeah.
But like unless the business actually like called us and was like, hey, you know, a bunch of like whatever Lululemon like leggings got stolen last night, like be on the lookout, then we couldn't really like, you know, hold anything for them like that. But yeah, we were definitely told to like not buy stuff that was like sketchy and just, you know, turn them away. Yeah, or like I have a friend who works at the Vegas store, and I guess it's like in downtown Vegas, which is kind of seedy sometimes, like some places, I guess. And they would come in with like, or people would come in with like stolen like just suitcases, which was always sketchy, that they would like steal from stores. So
that is super sketchy. So like, do different stores have like different buying needs? Because I've been to Buffalo, like I use Portland a lot as an example because there's 2 locations and they kind of had 2, like the product that was in them was kind of really different, I guess I would say. Like the one that was on the east side had a lot more like vintage stuff, and the one downtown had a lot more like, not expensive brands, but more like brands you would know. And I always thought that was interesting. Like, is that coincidental? Do different managers of different locations try to target different kinds of products?
Yeah, so it definitely goes off of like your physical location and like where you are, like, or who your customer is too, because, you know, sometimes you'd be surprised, like, yeah, Buffalo is like more inexpensive than like, you know, regular like mall stores and stuff, but we still get people who go in just looking for designer or just looking for like, vintage. So that definitely plays a part in it. But yeah, I worked at 2 SoCal stores, and one of them they're both in like, well, one was Orange County, one was LA County, but the Orange County one was definitely more like streetwear and like a little bit of designer, but not too much. And if we did get it, it would still sell, but at like a lower price point. And when I went to the one in LA, we can get the same like designer handbag and sell it for like, you know, maybe like $100 more, and it would sell like super quick. So that kind of goes on it too, like who your customer is. And then even like, depending like your physical location. So like one store was like kind of near the beach. So like swimsuits would do well there, like shorts, summer dresses, stuff like that. So yeah, definitely different stores have different needs. So it does play a part in it for sure.
And so this is the thing that I've always wondered about. Like, do you have like reports that show you the kinds of things that are selling? Because I guess the tags that you print out just have the price and like maybe the category, right? They're not like that specific. So you couldn't be like, oh, I just looked at our reports this week and we're selling a whole bunch of free people, so let's try to bring in more free people stuff. Like, could you get that kind of view into what was going on?
Not really. Unless, like, say a person, like a sales associate who's working, like, the cash register, and, like, they notice, like, oh, we sold all the free people we got today, or, you know, 3 of the things or whatever, then, like, they could just tell the manager and they can kind of go off of that. But as far as, like, official reports, it was all based on categories. So it would be, like, weekly, it would be like, oh, we sold, you know, this many tank tops, this many tees, this many dresses, and that, like, what price point was, like, the average. But as far as brands, no, there was no way to, like, monitor that on, like, the computer side of stuff.
That's too bad, because that'd be really cool.
Yeah, no, definitely. It makes it a lot easier to buy.
Yeah, for sure. That's what I was thinking. I wonder if anybody is doing that. Like maybe Crossroads. I don't know, because Crossroads, I feel like, is so much more like brand based than Buffalo. Buffalo is more about like the style, right?
Yeah, I would say so.
So the other question I have for you is, what's the deal with all the new stuff? Because there's the last time I went into Buffalo Exchange, it was in Philadelphia, and there was, like, everything I picked up was new, it felt like. It seems like there's a lot more of that. Like, where does that stuff come from? And does it sell well?
Yes. So I was actually surprised when I first started working there, because I had no idea. But yeah, it's actually like just stuff. I don't know exactly where they go, but they have buyers, like actual buyers, not like Buffalo Exchange buyers, but like buyers that go to like LA Mart, or like, I think how you mentioned how you would go for like Nasty Gal.
Yeah, down to the San Pedro Apparel Mart.
Yeah, and it's all just, we would call it new merchandise, so we would call it new merch, and we would get it shipped, at least at my stores, it was like 3 to 4 times a week, depending.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and like boxes, I mean, not like crazy amount of boxes, but anywhere from like 3 to 10 boxes, depending on the time of the year. But yeah, it's all new stuff, but all the clothes, shoes and accessories were all just like fast fashion, cheap stuff. And we all knew as employees, like we knew, like, oh, it's more new merch, we have to process it, put it out there, but we would just mix it in with everything else.
Right.
And when I first started working there, the tags for the new merch were a different color, and then later
I remember that.
They changed it to white, and then they changed it again to look, I mean, I don't know if it was on purpose or not, but to look closer to like our other tags. So I don't know, we kind of hated it just because we had to like process it and like take it out of, and like so wasteful, like typical like, you know, fast fashion. It comes in like a cardboard box and like a plastic box, and like the plastic hangers that we wouldn't even use, they just all get like thrown away. We don't recycle, by the way, so we shouldn't get them to recycle all that stuff. But
I mean, almost no one does. Like, I guess I've never talked about that on the show, but based on my experience working for many different companies, including companies that would seem to be more likely to care, all those poly bags and stuff just go in the trash. That's it.
Yeah. So yeah, it was all just new cheap stuff. And then for like Halloween, they would get like new Halloween costumes, and at least at the stores I was at, it never did well. We would always have so much left over, but they always pushed us to have Halloween costumes, and so they weren't even cool. Like, it wasn't even secondhand, like handmade vintage Halloween costumes. It was like, you know, the cheap stuff you can get at like Halloween or whatever.
Okay, that's really interesting to me because I hadn't thought about that, because I have noticed in the past few years that at Halloween, Buffalo Exchange is full of Halloween stuff. And like maybe 10 years ago, they would have a rack of some used stuff that was either like an actual costume or stuff that could be a costume, you know, like kind of like what the Goodwill does. But I began to notice that there were actually just racks of like brand new Halloween costumes and like tights and spooky makeup and stuff like that. And I always wondered, and I was always like, does that do well for Buffalo Exchange? Because it seems like if you are in the market for like a brand new costume, you probably wouldn't go to Buffalo Exchange. You would only go there for like used stuff to turn into a costume. I thought that was so weird. I mean, Goodwill does that now too. Like, well, all the thrift stores have like brand new costumes for sale.
Yeah, and I mean, my stores, it didn't do well, but we had a manager transfer from, I think, San Francisco, and she was shocked at how much, like, we had so little Halloween. So I guess it varies store to store, but yeah, we all hated it because we had to like make space for it in the store that was already packed with all the stuff, and then have to box it up after the season ended and like either decide to save it, or we would call donate it, but really we would send it to like our outlet stores. There's one in Arizona and one somewhere else, I don't remember. And then they would sell it at like a lower price, and then I don't know what they would do after that. But yeah, Halloween, and then also for holidays, they would get a lot of like gifty stuff, which I would say did better than costumes, but kind of like the stuff you'd find at like Spencer's or like, you know, or like Forever 21 and like the bins, like just stuff you grab, like stocking stuffers. But yeah, that was all new stuff too. So yeah,
I hate that.
Yeah.
I hate it. There's enough of that stuff in the world already. So I've never done this. I always, like, if I take my stuff to Buffalo Exchange, whatever they don't buy, I take with me for no particular reason. I just do. When people leave stuff, it gets donated, right? Where does it go?
So there was always, like, we would work with, like, charities. I can't remember, like, what they are now, but it would be, like, certain days of the week would be one charity, and then other days would be another one, and there would be someone from that charity would come and, like, pick them up. Like, it would be a huge, like, industrial, like, laundry bin, like, we would have at each store. And once that was full, we'd be like, just couldn't take anymore. And then they would come and just fill up trash bags and like take them to their van. Or sometimes there'd be like a donation, like truck, like delivery truck kind of. Mm-hmm. But yeah, they would just take them. I don't know. I think they got approved through corporate, who they actually were. Because to be honest, it could have been, especially the store I transferred to, the guy who would pick up donations was there for years and years. So I'm assuming he was from a charity, but to be honest, I never really knew. But yeah, they would just take them, and it was only supposed to be clothing and shoes. But if people just didn't want to take it, and we had space, we would just throw their bag in there and just let it go. But a lot of the stuff that people would bring sometimes was just bad, just Goodwill couldn't sell it, we wouldn't be able to sell it, and you're just okay, we'll just donate it. So I don't know.
Yeah, I've always wondered about that. And I was wondering, do a lot of people choose to just leave their stuff there and donate it, or do a lot of people take it? Because when I'm in there and I see the people with all the IKEA bags, they don't leave anything behind.
No, it's a mixed bag. Some people would just clean out their closet. They were, whatever they don't sell, they were going to take to Goodwill anyway, so they'll just leave it. Mm-hmm. Or it's the reverse, and it's stuff that they'll try to give to family, or or they just want to keep it because they were offended we didn't buy it or whatever. I don't know, but yeah, so I would say 50-50. They would leave it or they would take it, or just they didn't want to carry it back to their car, which is also if they're lugging in 5 bags.
I mean, I get it. Yeah, totally. So do you? I talked to someone else who worked for a different resale chain about this week. If someone comes in a really cute outfit, are you more likely to buy their stuff or not? Or does it not matter? Do you care?
I wouldn't care, but if it was the reverse and if it was a sketchy looking person or something, I think I would have my guard up more versus someone in a cute outfit. I've heard people say if they look good, they look fashionable, then I'm more likely to buy it. That didn't really affect me, but I could see that definitely playing a part in it. No, she has good style. Her stuff must be good, even if it was just average stuff.
Right.
Yeah, so I could see that having a.
Those are all the burning questions. Yeah, I mean, I just always wondered, was it, because I always am okay, I gotta look good to go sell this stuff just in case. But then I was am I doing all this work for nothing?
No, I would say it has a little bit. And then also, if people were known pickers, resellers, we would kind of get annoyed at that because we'd be I don't know why we would get annoyed, but it'd just kind of be they're just trying to make money off of us of the stuff they didn't sell, on their online shop or at the flea market and not this year, so there's
totally
always yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me. I think everybody's going to be really excited to hear what you have to say.
Thanks for having me. I was I'm just going to reach out to her. I don't know what's going to happen, but I feel I know you. I feel we're friends. Oh my God.
I get that. I feel that same way about all the podcasts that I listen to. I'm what? They don't know me? They don't know how much we have in common? Yeah. Thank you so much, Jessica, for taking the time to talk to me. I hope I asked all the questions that the rest of you had, but if I missed something, reach out to me and I'll see if we can get Jessica back on the horn. I've also recorded another conversation with another friend, Haley, who worked for a different secondhand clothing store and has a lot of experience selling on Poshmark. And I'm hoping to work that conversation with her into the next couple of episodes because it's a much longer convo, so I'm going to have to split it up. I am actively collecting stories of people, perhaps like yourself, who are involved in different parts of the secondhand clothing game because it's a rapidly growing industry, and all of the, retail industry publications that I read pretty regularly, a lot of analysts are looking to secondhand to be the savior of retail. And I have a lot of feelings about how that fits into retail while still benefiting sellers. So if you make a living selling secondhand via Poshmark, eBay, Etsy, Depop, flea markets, whatever, I'm probably missing something, please reach out to me. You can email me at clothehorsepodcast@gmail.com, or you can call the Clotheshorse hotline, 717-925-7417. You can leave a message, maybe just saying what you wanted to say, or we can set up some time to record our call like I just did with Jessica. I'm also really interested in collecting stories about any issues you have with Poshmark and Etsy. Like, in what ways do you think they have changed over time? How have they made it more difficult for you to make a living as a reseller? These are the things I'm thinking about as more and more big retailers are chasing after the idea of doing secondhand on their own. I think that could have a big impact on so many small business owners right now. So let's talk about it. Okay, moving on. The late 70s and early 80s brought a new type of show to network television. The soapy lives of the wealthy and fabulously dressed. And Westerners loved it immediately. I'm talking Dynasty, Knots Landing, Falcon Crest. Every character was wealthy, beautiful, and often up to no good. And the biggest of all these shows was Dallas. I think now is a good moment to tell all of you that Dallas is like a big show in my household. A few years ago, I told Dustin that I was nostalgic for shows of that era. And I think it was probably back when I had mono and I was just spending like months in bed, basically. And even though I hadn't really seen any of these primetime soaps of the 80s as a child, because, I was too little to watch them, I loved all of these silly plot lines and epic catfights and gorgeous costuming. So we started watching Dallas. Probably helped me get over mono, to be honest. I'm sure there's a correlation there. I literally bought every season of that show on Amazon Prime, and there's a lot of seasons. I want to say like 15. And I'm afraid to know how much it ultimately cost me, but we watched every last episode. So that was a couple years ago when we were still in Portland. And this year, when things were just, depressing, stressful, we were just so unhappy, we started watching it again, like from the very beginning. And it felt like hanging out with an old, super fun friend. We're kind of on a break right now because we're focusing on The Crown instead. I'm assuming when we're done with that, we're going to get back to Dallas. And the two shows have a lot more in common than you might expect. So Larry Hagman played J.R. Ewing. I'm sure you've heard his name, right? Not Larry Hagman maybe, but J.R. Ewing. And he was the conniving, scheming, but kind of sexy oil baron / mega villain. In 1996, he told a reporter for the Deseret News, quote, "I think Dallas brought the downfall of the Soviet Empire." He said that back in the 80s, he had a friend who was a Russian film director who used to trade caviar for videotapes of Dallas, which he would then smuggle back into the USSR. Hagman said he took over the entire Dallas catalog, whatever it was up until that time, a couple of hundred shows, and they would bootleg the stuff. People would tell me that they'd seen it in Russia and say, "Why don't we have that all over here? Why can't we have those cars and that glitz and all that stuff?" You mean people actually live that way? Because they thought it was all propaganda from the Americans. They actually saw Dallas and the way we live, and they wanted that. And I think it contributed a lot to the downfall of the USSR. Of course, Hagman was also willing to admit that the Ewing lifestyle was, quote, "not exactly how people live." But he said, "I think it contributed to it. I really do." And I kind of love that story. And I was like, well, it makes sense to me. Strangely, more than 20 years later, I guess actually 25 years later, Dave Stewart of the Eurythmics, which is a big band of the 80s, told a reporter a similar story about a conversation with former leader of the Soviet Union, Mikhail Gorbachev. What Gorbachev was saying, and this is the quote, what Gorbachev was saying, it was Dallas, the TV show. Somebody managed to get a VHS to work and broadcast it to part of Russia, and they thought, hang on, that's how people live in America. Well, whether or not any of this is true, it does say something about the mere idea of wealth being sort of like the fuel for capitalism. Even though most people are losers at the game of capitalism, that's the truth, and only a tiny, tiny fraction of people get to be the winners, the idea that you might eventually win kind of keeps you on board with capitalism. It's like people who know that the odds of winning the lottery are so microscopic, but they still buy a ticket every day. The idea that these shows that were essentially the most conspicuous consumerism with a heavy splash of drama could lead to the downfall of a communist society, well, it makes sense to me because it promises you a ticket to play the game of capitalism, where, much like the real lottery, the odds of winning are extremely low, but just the feeling of having a chance gives you some hope to keep going. I've been thinking a lot about the story of Dallas and the Soviet Union as I've been working on these consumerism episodes, so I just had to share that with you. And if any of you are interested in starting like a Dallas viewing club, please holler at me. Okay, let's get into our final installment of Gillian. You said something today as we were texting, as we do, about lofty ideas, that
Yes.
you said you were like, I feel more into the term essentialism than minimalism. And I was like, wow, this is great. We have to talk about this. Essentialism being the driving decision maker for what you choose to buy or not buy, along with your ethics, of course. And I found this quote before then, and I was like, this fits together so well. Ariel Bernstein, who's a daughter of refugees, wrote in a 2016 Atlantic piece, "For my grandparents, the question wasn't whether an item sparked joy, but whether it was necessary for their survival."
Mm-hmm.
And I just loved that when we talk about things sparking joy, we're still talking about buying a lot of stuff that we don't need, and really talking about like what we need to survive and be comfortable, right? Like we're not saying, hey, get rid of all your coats, turn off the heat, sit in the dark. We're not saying that.
Even beyond that, though, like I think even beyond the like necessary for survival or like the joy sparking, I actually, as you were reading that, I started to think about the Velveteen Rabbit. I think because well, this is where like my lateral thinking went, and because it ties in with what I was saying earlier about I have a friend who for sure owns a shop and buys a lot of things and sells a lot of things, but she said something once that like I turn over in my brain every once in a while, where she's like, well, if I have something in my life and I'm like touching it every day or touching it multiple times every day, I want to like love that thing. And I think that like when we think about our relationship to things in general, like there's a lot of like sentimentality tied into it and like really intangible stuff that we're always trying to like project upon and like infuse into physical objects and clothing and everything else. And so I think there's like an aspect that like when you think about like I don't know, when you think about like something that's an antique, like why is an antique so precious? It's because like probably like at the time that, you know, like say you always find those like they look like tubs, like or like a baby cradle, but they're made for working dough in. They're like kneading trough kind of. You see anything like that, and you're like, oh, someone's selling it for like $600, $2,000 or whatever. And then you're like, oh, well, but you know, like think about like the life in this thing. The fact that somebody like for who knows how many years, every day or like, you know, once a week made their bread in this thing. You know, like that is like a kind of value in an object that we really have like become both divorced from and obsessed with, I think simultaneously, because I think that like a lot of what people try to do with this kind of like cinematic kind of creating, like I put it in the document, it's like creating this sort of like synthetic heraeth sort of feeling, which is this Welsh word that doesn't have a translation in English, but it means this like nostalgia or homesickness for like an experience that you've never actually had. And I feel like that is like there's a kernel of that though in this like hole that we always feel like we're trying to fill with like objects and clothing and stuff, because I mean when you think about like how many pictures go up on Instagram in a day, But then you're like, well, what's the value of those pictures versus like the one photograph I have of like my great grandmother?
Right, right. Well,
There's
I mean,
no comparison.
I do think, I mean, photos are a great example here. Like a photo used to be this rare thing that might happen to you once in your lifetime.
Yeah,
And then
maybe.
right? And then they became a little bit more common where you might see someone taking some photos at special occasions, right? Because developing film was expensive. And then film went away and everything became digital, and suddenly we're taking pictures of our breakfast.
And there was also that really special like Twilight Zone of photography where like you could get your photos developed, but then Polaroids were like the only kind of pictures you would ever take of like a dick pic or like a dirty picture, because you didn't want to take them, because you didn't want to take them to like the photo mat and have the like, spotty teenager leering at.
I'm not sure if I've ever told you this story. This is definitely a digression, but
Please.
my mom was Marie Kondo before Marie Kondo existed, meaning that like we never held on to anything ever. Even things you might say like, hey, how about some photos of our childhood? Nope. Throw them out. They take up space. So we just like, she was constantly gutting our house of our possessions. And every time we'd move, all of our stuff would go away. And so all I have from my childhood is one photo album of some pictures of my brother and I. And they even cut off around the time we're like maybe 6 or 7. Mm-hmm. And so this is like precious to me, right? This is all we have. It's the only documentation we have of our childhood.
Your early childhood, yeah.
Yes. It was the kind, like how photo albums used to be, where they were like the plastic thing that you would peel off and you'd stick the photos in and then lay the plastic back down. Well, one of them was coming a little loose and I adjusted it and out fell 2, oh my God, this is so horrifying. 2 Polaroids of one of my mom's husbands, her third husband, standing against a wood-paneled wall, wearing...
Of course, where else would he be standing?
Wearing tiny zebra print underwear.
That reminds me of that controversial Calvin Klein campaign that they had to
Oh my God, totally.
Phillips, where it's literally like it's the wood paneled wall and like the underage looking kids.
Totally. Oh my God, totally. I just cited that recently in another conversation with someone, but yes.
Loved it. I was like, because it hit me at like the perfect moment where my little adolescent brain was like, this is like what I want.
This is what sexiness is. Apparently, my mom already knew that. Okay. So anyway.
Out of the bleeding edge.
So, but Polaroids were expensive too. So like, even when you're like, listen, we're going to take this sexy photo of you in your new underwear in front of this wood panel wall. Like we want to make sure that we really nail it, because we can't get through a whole box, The
reason why Mapplethorpe was such an incredible photographer was because he did everything on Polaroid for the longest time. And so he really needed to get his shots
yeah, totally. It's like super expensive. So anyway, back to essentialism as a way of life. You had a really great example around shoes.
Yes. Okay. So on election day, I ate some acid and I was like wandering around my house.
As you do.
Yeah, no, because it really does there's no other thing that like works like an antidepressant for me than like doing some psychedelics and just kind of, I don't know, it really opens up my empathy for myself and sort of just like it gives me like a more I don't know exactly how to put it. Like, I feel like I kind of dilate and can like appreciate my environment and like my state and where I'm at, like in a much more just like present way. It's just, I find. And so one of the things that I noticed when I was sort of like drinking some red wine and then like I was eating some chips and I had my 2 pairs of shoes that were next to each other by my door. And it's like this pair of leather, essentially they're like leather flip-flops from Fry, so they're like leather sandals, and then I have this pair of Uggs that I got for $5 at Out of the Closet. I never owned Uggs before, and so when I saw these Uggs I was like, it's better late than never, I guess. Like I missed the first round of Ugg fever, but they're very warm and they're super comfortable, and so I sort of had like these 2 pairs of shoes next to each other, and they both were also like, I had like a candle burning, and like they're both this sort of like buff color, so it all just felt like I was kind of like living in this like really simplified, like Adobe, like cat people of the outer realms sort of sort of environment. And I just looked at them and I was like, so I've got like my warm weather shoes, and I've got my like house shoes that are also suitable for really cold days, and then I have a pair of Blundstones that I can wear for like literally any activity under the sun. And I was like, do I actually need any more shoes? Because like at this stage, I have like 3 other pairs of shoes, but I don't actually put them on or ever use them. So I'm like, maybe this is it. And like, maybe the kind of brand loyalty that I'm into is like Blundstone, because I wear the shit out of those shoes and I only need to replace them like once every 5 or 6 years, you know? And like,
no,
I'm cool with that.
I mean, I loved when you reached out to me about that, because I'd had a similar thought recently. I mean, I don't have a ton of shoes anyway. I haven't been much of a shoe collector. I kind of just wear them until they disintegrate, because I'm an actual like walking around person, you know? But it made me think about this whole cultural trope that women should have a lot of shoes. I mean, we can look at the Sex and the City as an example, right? And I was telling you how, you know, sometimes Justin and I like to watch Married at First Sight, which is both terrible and great. And a common occurrence on this show is that these new husbands who have just met their wife, their now wife, go to the wife's apartment, and the closet is just filled with shelves of shoes. And there's a lot of hemming and hawing and hand-wringing over how these shoes will all be moved to their new mutual apartment.
How they will be accommodated within the
house. Yes. And the man is always annoyed and the woman's sort of defensive. And the one thing I will say that these shoes always have in common is that they are all incredibly ridiculous. Like the kinds of shoes that you can only wear for a short period of time and then your feet hurt, right? And you never actually see the women wearing any of these shoes on the show. They're wearing like the same sneakers every day because once again, like these shoes are ridiculous. And then I started thinking about how not only is there's this trope that women should have tons of shoes, and there are even like subscription services that will sell you tons of dumb shoes every month, but there's also a side industry that is made of gifts you give people because they're shoe lovers, like little, you know what I mean? Little tchotchkes that are like a high heel that's bedazzled, and Christmas ornaments that are shoes. And
or like those
little cards.
Those little jingly things you put on your wine glass, but they're like shaped like shoes.
They're like shoes. Yeah. And I was just like, why? Like, if you think clothes are bad for the environment, let me tell you, shoes are 10 times worse for the environment.
Well, and the other thing too, just like as you're talking about that, it just like fills me with like this sense of just like pure sadness that like what your friends know about you and like identify you as an individual is like, well, she loves shoes. You know what I mean? Like that just like speaks to a larger problem where like people don't take the time to like learn about the interior lives of other people, where they're just oh, look at this tea towel that says Shoe Queen on it. She'll love it. She loves shoes. Which also like for me, I feel like involves that like cat lady trope where I feel like there are plenty of people in my life that are like, she loves her cats. This is perfect for her. You know?
Like, I know. I trust me, as a 3 cat household, I know, I like a legendary cat lady, if you will. I feel that pain where I'm like, no, I love animals. I love cats. I don't love cat merch. Okay. No. That's not my aesthetic. It's funny to me because I mean, you would know I'm a very aesthetic person. Like I have very clear, if you walk into my home, you can see what I'm into and what I'm not. And I'm going to tell you, I don't decorate with a lot of cat themed stuff.
Well, you do have a few little ceramic cats.
Yes, but they're all vintage and from the thrift store. And that sort of began in the same way you're talking about, where people would be like, oh, you love cats. I saw this cute ceramic cat at the thrift store. And I'd be like, you know what? That is cute. Okay. I guess I like thrift store cat figurines. And now I have like 100 of them.
Well, and that reminds me of my dad's dad, my grandfather. Like, we knew so little about him. Like, he wasn't really like that into making himself available to get to know. And I just remember every time it was like his birthday, we just give him another fucking bulldog figurine. And it wasn't even because he enjoyed bulldogs. It was just because he went to Yale. So it was like, oh.
Oh my God. Yeah, that's like, I mean, but that's happening all over the country right now.
Frequently. Like, this is people, like, Black Friday's just around the corner. People are firing up to buy all kinds of novelty shit for people.
Yeah, like for the shoe lovers in their lives, for the people who went to Yale, for people who have a cat. So thinking about this idea of essentialism, I think that leads into, like, you and I were sort of talking about, like, what's the future of consumerism? Mm-hmm. Like, how do we do it better? And I mean, I think that all starts with living within your means, which is painful for a lot of people, because what are your means really?
Yeah.
That's a hard reckoning you have to have with yourself. I took a business class a couple years ago, an amazing instructor in Portland. And she was like, for people really discussing and knowing and believing and accepting their true financial situation is like most people's number one fears.
The first place my mind goes is like when you hear these true crime stories about family annihilators, and you realize that, like, I think 90% of the times that these men kill their entire families, it's like because they lost their job and they couldn't bear to tell everyone that they lost their job, and they're like, so I'm gonna go sit, like, I think what's his face, the really famous one, List, I think his name was, the guy, the Connecticut guy, the guy that they ended up catching on, like, America, or on Unsolved Mysteries or whatever, but he, like, got up every day, dressed like he was going to work, like, sat and read a newspaper at the train station in his car, came home, and just, like, but to him, the idea of, like, his family finding out that they couldn't keep living in a certain size house was, like, worse than them all being dead. And, like, that is a poison in our culture. Like, that is really fucked up.
It is. Or even in this class I was in, people were like, I'm afraid to check my credit score.
Oh, geez.
And I'm like, yeah, I hear you. It's super scary. But, like, this is all about coming to terms with where you are, what you have to spend, and what your future can be, and kind of grabbing the bull by the horns and, changing this for yourself. And so I think living within your means / accepting what your means are is really important. And I know it's painful in this world where what you do and what you have is supposed to be who you are. Like, that's why a man would kill his whole family rather than admit he lost his job. That's an extreme version of it. But so is going out and buying new clothes every week on your credit card and carrying forward this huge balance,
Well, so is agreeing to attend your friend's, bachelorette party in Palm Springs, even though you know that it's gonna, like, put $1,000 on your credit card, and these are all, like, I think that's, like, a broader question about our expectations as a culture of, like, what life is, and I think that for better in some ways, I think COVID is, like, helping us to get a better grip on that in some ways. Like, because I think before, like, when I think about maybe part of the reason why in, like, 2019 people felt so compelled to spend such money on, like, the birthday week, month itineraries was because, like, it actually, the way that, like, work is designed in our culture, it's actually pretty fucking hard to see people, So it, like, when you get to actually get together with someone, it feels like an occasion.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that's problematic. And that deals to the whole other ball of wax in our culture about, like, the way our cities are designed, and the fact that, like, some cities you literally can't survive in without a car, and just shit like that. And the distances that we live at from one another. And so, like, when we get into this time now in COVID where you're like, shit, what's really important is, like, spending time face to face with people. And, like, I've been, like, for the past year or so, I've had times where, like, if I know I'm going to go see someone in person, I just, like, leave my phone at home, because I'm like, literally nothing will happen on my phone in the next, like, 4 hours that is more important than, like, actually being with this person that I'm with. And so I think that, like, if we get to, like, that sense of, like, the scale that we're living on, and whether it's really designed for humans or whether it's been designed for these, like, fads like automobiles and, like, the internet, like, I think that's, like where's the cart and where's the horse?
No, I think that's really true. I say this a lot on the show and I really believe it, but I do think that 2020 is a great chance for us to reset.
I think so, yeah.
And understand ourselves a lot more. I mean, I want to believe that. I'm going to be really pissed if I see everybody out taking brunch photos in 6 months.
I'm pissed if we can talk about brunch. We'll get to it.
But we'll get to it because we have a lot of strong feelings about brunch.
We do, yeah. It's becoming a very divisive issue in these trying times.
It is, and I kind of love it because it had been on my mind for a long time. And then finally, one day we were recording an episode of The Department and I went off about it. And the number of people who have reached out to me and were like, thank you so much for saying what I've been thinking for years, made me feel like, oh, maybe I'm not this weirdo fringe lunatic that I always thought I was. It was actually really good.
Yeah.
It was good for me and my mental health to be like, oh, wait, we were all pretending we liked brunch.
Yeah.
Anyway, brunch is coming shortly.
It is. It's around the corner.
But that goes back to this idea of like taking a breath, assessing what we really have and what we truly need. And I feel like something you see people doing all the time on social media is they'll post a photo of something expensive they want to buy. And it's like, is this need or is this want? And you're like, I mean, it's obviously want, right? You knew that when you posted it.
You're just wanting people to like tell you that you're worth it.
Yeah, exactly. It's less about you buying that thing and more about people being like, girl, you deserve whatever you want. Or that whole like treat yourself idea. And like, listen, you should treat yourself sometimes, okay? But not every day or every week. Like, and I can say this having been at points in my life where all I could do was treat myself to cope with my life. And I was like, I have all this stuff that I hate. It's like a burden for me as a person who's constantly moving, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, I think the thing about that too is like, I think sometimes we get very disassociative about what we actually feel about the things that we're buying and experiencing. And like sometimes we like work ourselves up into these sort of like froths about like certain stuff. And then you get it and then you're like, oh, it's that letdown. It's that sort of like it spikes and then there's like a really hard come down from it. And it's all about the dopamine and everything else. But like, I do think like when people really like assess their purchases and even like a lot of these experiences that like you're surprised by how kind of like how they leave you cold. Like I was talking to a friend of mine recently and it was about a birthday thing. This friend had like a milestone birthday within like the past couple of years. And so did plan like not a full, like month-long extravaganza, but there were like a couple different things and they were like, okay, like no pressure, like if you can come to this, that's great, like this is where it's going to be, like, and did say to me like, it's weird, I like made this effort and it was all these things that like I was pretty sure I would enjoy, and then like afterwards I was a little bit like about it, and
yeah, I know that feeling.
Yeah, and I think that there's also that aspect of like trying to like micromanage our experiences, which certainly is played into by social media because it's all about the like pictures or it didn't happen or like sort of staging your experience or being so like hyper aware of the way the experience might look that you're not actually experiencing it. Like, I think it's always just kind of remarkable when you talk to people and you ask them like, what's like something you've done in like the past 6 months that you just felt was like really enjoyable, you know what I mean? And like it's surprising, I think, to hear what people actually say, because sometimes people are like, oh, you know what it was like just this day when I like decided to like just take a pressure off of myself and like just allow myself to just like, watch the British Bake Off all day long, and I just like had a really good time, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
it's like,
yeah, I know. And I think, you can't Instagram that, so how will everybody know you had a great day? We need to we need to get rid of that. When I think about social media and how it has totally changed our experiences, probably for the worse, I think about the one and only time I went to the Broad in LA, which
I hate the Broad.
Yeah, there's a million annoying things about it.
I have a story about the Broad too, but I want to hear yours.
Okay. So I went to the Broad, my friends and I were all very excited. We got up really early to get in line. It was, you have to, when it first opened, you really had to game the system to get in. And there is a lot of amazing art in there that you've probably only seen in photos. Although if I could give one piece of feedback, it's that it's all crammed together. So it's like, it's hard to enjoy what you see in there. And most of it is like the big ticket items of art. So it's sort of like, it could be better. I don't know. I could go, that's a whole other.
Yeah, no, there's the Kuntz factor.
Yeah,
there's
exactly. Oh my God. Exactly.
And there is the feeling too, where it's a little bit kind of like hit parade, where it's like there's nothing like that novel or like surprising going on.
It's like here's the greatest hits of contemporary art, and like you already know those pieces. I want to see something else. So anyway, the thing that drove me crazy, I had a very negative time there. I'm going to say that. Like,
me too. Okay. I hated it.
Every single person who was in the museum was just only there to take photos of every single piece. And I saw multiple couples or groups of people who would walk up to the piece of art, not look at it, just take a photo on their phone. And then they would gather around the phone and look at the art on the phone. And
I think that there's actually like some kind of a Tumblr or something of that, of like people looking at pictures of art on phones at like the Louvre and like every
terrible. It was so terrible. And of course, they'd also be standing in front of the art so you can actually look at it. And like it just, everything about it was so infuriating because no one was actually there looking at the art and appreciating it. They were coming up with social media content. And the number of people who I saw only look at the art through their phone was so sad.
Staggering. Yeah. Well, and that's so my story about the Broad real quick is very of a piece with what you were just talking about. But the thing that will like haunt me forever about the Broad is being in the Kara Walker room.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know the one where it has like she did all the sort of like they're like shadow cut out.
I'm already
getting like
I'm getting anxiety about this because I can already see how this can go wrong. And I will definitely I will add a link to Kara Walker's work in the show notes so you can understand why I'm getting this building sense of dread. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, I mean, I can describe it just in case people, but you should look at her work. I mean, she's
it's some
really
of the best
artist.
Stuff that's there, I would say.
I would certainly put her like at the very top of the heap, like top 3 things that I saw there.
For sure.
And so beautiful, like really like provocative work. And it's to do with, Kara Walker is a Black woman herself. And it's like to do with slavery and, the whole kind of like long torrid history of, white supremacy in this country and much else. And, I just remember being in that room watching like white couples take selfies in front of
I knew.
I was just like, oh, get me out of here. This isn't funny. Like this is a parody, but it isn't funny. It's like,
oh, yes, seriously. I knew that's where that story was going to go.
Yeah, like you almost could have just finished my sentence.
Yeah. I was like, I know this is going to get really gross.
The other thing that's like sort of the opposite of that, that's like an upbeat thing to say about trying to take photos of experiences, is that I always really appreciate how when you see like a fucking spectacular sunset, you can't really get a photo of it with your phone.
I know. I love that. I love that. Especially in LA where the sunsets are always like so majestic and you'll see a constant flood of them on Instagram, but it never conveys it. I love that.
Never does them justice. And I love it because it's like, this is like what it means to have an experience, and just like, this is on the experience's terms, not on like your mediation of the experience's terms.
Totally. The last thing I would say about the future of consumerism and how we can do better is to buy from small businesses. Like I've said this before, I'll say it again, 97% of the profits made globally selling clothing and shoes and accessories to you are made by 20 companies. And these companies are massive. I know that's disgusting. These companies are massive. The people who work there are super out of touch. They don't have that empathy that we were talking about earlier. And you do not need to be giving your money to them. If we're ever going to change the status quo for how things are sold to us, what's sold to us, what we buy, we need to stop giving money to these big companies and we need to support small businesses. I mean, that's just how it is.
It's true. And I would say like to go like a little deeper into just like your personal relationship with buying and how that can be in the future. Like, I think what I keep coming back to is this feeling, like, I think you've talked about it on the show sometimes, about how like one kind of check that you put on yourself is that you'll like open the window and select the item and like leave it there and not buy the item, not press buy right away. Because I do think that like giving yourself just like that little bit of space just to like sleep on it can really do wonders for, and I mean sometimes it's not possible because like there is that element of like treasure hunting. Like if you're at a thrift store or something, you might just have to be like, okay, like it's now or never.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. That's true. I mean, if you're in a thrift store or, out in the wild like that, I get it. But I do, when we talk about all the emotional reasons that we buy stuff, that's what's just it, is that most of our purchases are driven by emotions. And if we can just take that emotion out a little bit, we're going to end up with less stuff that we don't love. We're going to end up with less disappointment. We're going to end up with more money, actually. And we'll be able to use that money to buy better things that are going to last us longer.
Yeah, or to maintain the things that we have that we really love and want to,
That's right. Because mending, tailoring, cobblers, hat repair people, their services aren't cheap because they're highly skilled.
They are. They're specialized. And like the other thing about it too is just like thinking about the emotional drive to buy things. I mean, we talk a lot about eating our feelings. We definitely buy our feelings too, like all the time.
Totally.
All the time.
Totally. I was thinking about that. I mean, speaking of the election, the common thread on my social media feed and messages from my friends is that everybody's living on pizza and baked goods right now. And I was kind of wondering, are people also buying lots of dumb shit? Because this is a crazy time.
Yes.
I don't know. I mean, we did go to the grocery store and buy basically just cake and donuts. So I was wondering, I don't know, like is fast fashion getting a lift from this?
A little boost. I don't know. I've done, like, when I think about my own consuming habits just in the past, sort of 48 hours since it happened, I did decide while I was having my kind of like simplicity of shoes moment that I'm gonna like really, I think my own sort of like winter spring or like autumn winter story that I'm leaning into is that I'm this kind of like, I'm a little bit of a cave woman, but I think I'm also Mediterranean or maybe Alpine. And a big part of that, like basically like my ideal man has been for some time now, Ötzi the Iceman. Like he's just got it all, he's got like a little pouch of mushrooms. He's got all these cool little like acupuncture charcoal tattoos. He's just like, he's a simple guy, he's just out walking in the Alps and then he ended up frozen for thousands of years, but I can respect that. And so but I imagine myself, I'm like kind of living in like one of those caves from like the Joni Mitchell song. And I've just got like my red wine with me. And I'm like, it's red wine. Like that's where my money's going. I'm not drinking beer. I did a lot of bitters and soda over the hot season. But I'm also, it's interesting because like even my relationship with drinking wine, I think like I've put through like a bit of a capitalist fool's hero journey where like this time last year I was working in like an upscale wine shop, and it, like clothing and like slow food, like you can spend a lot of money on your wine because I mean, don't get me wrong, there is like food, there is an element there of like, there's a reason why it costs that much. And like, handmade clothing, there's a reason why it costs that much. But you can just like get so lost in the story of this, like esoteric Swiss man who has to like, kind of pick his way up a hill like a little goat and like tend to his, like vines that were planted by the Romans, just shit like that, which like,
yeah.
But also like the thing that the psychedelic experience has shown me is that like it's your own brain. Like that's the trick. It's actually all coming from your own brain. None of this shit exists because someone else told you the story. It's like, if you can imagine the story, you can dream up the story, you can have that experience without buying anything. It's like, it's all its own experience unto itself. You don't necessarily have to buy the thing or drink the wine.
Right there. I mean, guys, that's your new marching order. Okay. Like you just nailed it. Thank you. Gillian for dropping acid so the rest of us don't have to. You know, doing all the heavy lifting for us.
Oh, I think you should. What can I
You're
say?
You're really a giver.
Whatever
You're a real
it takes.
giver. So
I'm a giver.
the last thing we're going to talk about is something that Gillian and I started riffing on and we just couldn't stop talking about, which is brunch culture as an analog for fast fashion. And it's like, I have so many feelings here. So why don't you jump in, because you had a lot of, I mean, I know you have, there's something in all caps typed in here that you really summarizes it.
Yeah, I was really hot off the mark on this one, Amanda. So, I mean, the basics are, and Amanda knows this about me, and you may all be intuiting this about me. I like a Venn diagram. I find that they're like a really helpful way of like just kind of like organizing my thoughts around things and like what it is about some things that like pushes my buttons, rubs me the wrong way or whatever. And so the thing about brunch being like fast fashion, I think can be summarized really succinctly in a statement that a friend of mine, her ex-husband, said a few years ago. I'll drop my friend's name. I don't know if she'll listen to this episode or not, but my friend Miranda and her husband Ben one day were, I forget if they were actually like having breakfast or somehow like got on the topic of it. And Ben was just like, almost like with tears in his eyes, I think just with like the humor and like just the absurdity of the revelation as it occurred to him. He was just like, pancakes are pure profit.
Which they are.
Like, what are they? They're like flour, sugar, like some water.
Yeah, I mean, it's like the cheapest ingredients. And when you and I started talking about it, we were like, wait, eggs are super cheap, flour, a little bit of cheese. I mean, basically everything you're eating at brunch is like the cheapest food you can buy, but you're out paying a premium for it and you're Instagramming it the whole time.
Yeah, and meanwhile, you're like putting all this hype on the experience because brunch, particularly in urban settings, it is this sort of like competitive sport. Like, you know, it's all about like, well, you know, like, oh, well, how many people is it going to be? And like, oh, you know, like, and then there seemed to be this phenomena for a while where like brunching parties would sort of like expand and balloon and like someone would sort of like show up, you know, because everyone's sort of like, the idea is you're rolling out of bed and like you're hungover and you're hungry and you want your brunch. And so the next thing you know, you got like a party of 9 and you're standing outside for 2 hours. It's like trying to get ramen or something.
It is. And everybody's hemming and hawing and fretting about like getting there early enough, who's going to wait in line, what if they won't seat you if the whole party's not there, and there's all this furious text messaging and you're starving by the time you sit down.
Tempest in a teacup. And also like another cheap thing that happens at brunch is the bottomless mimosa. You know, they're putting like fucking Andre in that shit. You know, that's not Veuve Clicquot.
I've never had a bottomless mimosa that didn't give me a raging headache. Like,
oh geez, yeah.
Make me feel like garbage for the rest of the day. It's like this consumer experience that is supposed to be like an essential experience of a good lifestyle, a life well lived, is just like so disappointing. And when you realize that you can make pancakes for $1 at home, it's like,
oh, you can make yourself a tall stack for $1.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
It reminds me also, like, I was at, and I feel this way kind of about all breakfast foods, eating all breakfast foods out in the world, unless it's like a weird thing where you're like away from home traveling and you like need, you know, like a muffin with an egg on it to
eat. Yeah.
You know, but yeah, the idea, like, I know I make good eggs and I eat them every single morning. So like, why the fuck would I spend like $17 for that shit? And like, I was at a place when I was up in the Bay visiting recently, and someone was like, oh, you should try their oatmeal. And I was like, why the fuck would I buy oatmeal?
Why? Oatmeal is like the easiest thing to make at home. And you can buy a huge, like a pound of oatmeal for like $3. Like, why?
Mean, in Scotland, the nickname for prison is porridge, because that's what you eat when you're in prison. It's
yeah.
like, the rage of like the $8 toast that came out in the Bay recently. And like, I remember when I was working in a food service position last year, they would do these like $8 single portion yogurt parfaits. And there was this guy who was such a dickhead, and he would always get it every single day. He would get one, and he was always such a little princess about it. And he'd be like, is this one from like the freshest batch? And I was like, bitch, you know that for $10 you could be eating yogurt parfaits in the comfort of your own home for like a week. It's just like,
that guy is spending $240 each month on a yogurt parfait. Like, what? I'm way too like working class to be okay with that. Sorry.
I know.
And I'm sorry if we're shaming anybody about their parfait consumption right now, but like, hopefully this is unlocking something in your brain. Like, once again, this is a metaphor for all the other shit we're consuming, especially fast fashion. So fast fashion, it's always disappointing. It's not the best ingredients, right? It's not the best experience. It might not fit you that well. You don't feel great after you did it. Maybe you got to post on Instagram in the process. Like you pointed out, Gillian, that it projects this idea of like an aspirational lifestyle. Like, look at me. I ate breakfast midday for hours.
Outside of my house.
Yes, with others. And I think I've mentioned this on previous episodes, but maybe I haven't. But back in my Nasty Gal days, we literally had a meeting to talk about how girls wanted to wear a new dress every time they went to brunch, and that we needed to build a brunch dress assortment. This really happened to me. I'm
so sorry, Amanda.
I really went to showrooms looking for brunch clothing. And that was when I was already like, I think brunch kind of sucks. Like, hashtag buyer's life, guys. Okay. So I feel like brunch is not only a metaphor for fast fashion, they're like tied together. You know, they're traveling buddies.
It's an unholy union.
Yeah, it's like you can't have one without the other.
The other thing about brunch is that I really feel like in the past, certainly for me, I feel like I've gotten pretty radical and political in my disdain for brunch, because for me, and I don't know how it is in other places, but I live in an unspecified portion of LA. And I really I associate in my mind brunch with the ethos of the people who quote unquote are looking forward to going back to normal after COVID.
Oh my God. Thank you.
Because I really do. And like, I was talking about it, and like, I came to it, like you were sort of saying, and I think maybe this is like more of a zeitgeist than we realize. And maybe you'll get, maybe your inbox will be flooded and your voicemail will just be like singing with people in this. But because I was going on this bike ride around my town, and it was just sort of like I'd loop here and loop there. And I was absolutely floored, like right at that point that I think we in California were referring to as like the second wave of COVID, which was kind of around like June. I think it was sort of like late June, early July. It was when my roommates both got it. and there's a direct correlation between brunch and Instagram photos of food and my roommates getting COVID. There was like a literal cause and effect of like seeing their coworkers out eating brunch, and then everybody at their job got it. But yeah, and brunch, they're like putting the tables out. They're not really well spaced. Nobody's wearing a mask. We're all fucking standing in line. It's just, it's like an absolute, it's like when those children get chicken pox and all their hippie moms throw a party to give everyone chicken pox, but for COVID, that's brunch. It's a petri dish. And so I was really like passionately like, I should just be like, fuck your brunch, you guys. I should like put a banner on the back of my bike and just be like, fuck all your brunch. And then my friend, who's been really involved with a lot of direct action and a lot of the protests here in town, was like, oh, we like marched down down one of these streets one day just shouting, "Fuck your brunch." And I was like, yes, yes, that's how I feel. And I love that like this whole other group of people came to that as well.
I mean, I love it because you're right. I know in LA, restaurants are only open for outside dining, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, correct.
Okay, so
or like takeaway, of course.
Here in Pennsylvania, I want to say indoor dining started, well, depending on where you lived, because there were all these zones. But in Philadelphia, it was like the first week of October. Out here in Lancaster County, where I live now, I think it's been going on for a long time. And immediately, brunch was going off. I suddenly started seeing tons of brunch photos on Instagram. And I do think like these people who love brunch are the people who are like, I hope everything goes back to normal after this. And you know what? I don't want everything to go back to normal after all this.
Exactly.
Because as we touched on when we began recording this episode, things have been going badly for a long time. This is our chance to say, hey, finally I see how rotten everything is. Let's do better. Blindly being like, oh, I got to put on my brunch dress and go out to brunch kind of shoves that all back under the rug, and I don't like it.
Neither do I. And I actually, speaking of the word aspirational, I had this talk with the woman who was cutting my hair like about a month or so ago. And I think what I said to her, because she was saying how, you know, like she's been doing all these different things and like she's really like felt her eyes open to all of these flaws in the system that she is very like passionate about finding solutions to and like supporting. And then I said to her, I was like, yeah, I mean, I feel like it's like the least aspirational thing in the world to go back to quote unquote the way things were. Like, I feel like that's like, in a way, that's like the little sister of Make America Great Again. It's like,
it is.
Because it's this sort of like people that exist in such a bubble of privilege that either like COVID just didn't happen to them in the same way that it happened to the people that are systemically the most underserved people in this country, in this world. Like, just that, like, yeah, I just don't know how you could. I mean, it feels like as if somebody had like, you know, gone through an entire like transformational experience, like, you know, anything. And that the idea that like your takeaway from that is like, okay, cool. Can I like go back to what I was doing before?
Yeah. Like that's just no, that's not what I do think wanting things to go back to how they were / going out to brunch is such a hallmark of privilege right now.
It is.
And I see people who are still, even in the midst of this, trying to live as if nothing happened. I see people going on vacation, okay, getting on planes, going somewhere warm, going to the Caribbean, going overseas. I see people having Halloween parties.
Oh, that was huge. Like this past week, there was like one of the lesser Kardashian little ones had the party that was like at some hotel in LA, and they nobody was wearing a mask. It's just like, it really does feel like let them eat cake style shit, where you're just like, okay, I get it. Everybody's tired of, you know, having to wear masks all the time in public. Everyone's tired of like, you know, having to stay home all the time. But that doesn't mean that you can like throw your money at this and just like rub it in everyone else's faces that you don't give a shit.
Yeah. I think there's something so weird and like old-timey about just wanting things to go back to normal and living life like nothing's happening. And the people who are doing that, I mean, I hate to say this, but they're like not cool.
They're not cool. And I mean, also, I think it's like fundamentally the idea of things going back to anything is just not actually how like nature works. Like, I think even when you talk about things being like back to nature, quote unquote, or being like reclaimed by nature, it's just like everything is always evolving. Everything is always like, I feel like we go through these cycles where like there's cycles of sort of stability, and then there's cycles where things like naturally grow out of proportion to like what is sustainable. And then there's like a correction or an overcorrection, and there's upheaval. Like, I think that the idea that like people seem to think that they're entitled to like live in like this constant lap of plenty of this whatever fucking quote unquote American dream is just short-sighted, and it doesn't actually like reflect the nature of like the reality of a lived experience as like
Yeah.
organisms.
Yeah. No, totally, totally. I feel like today sitting around and saying, I can't wait to go out to brunch, or I'm still living as if I can go out to brunch and go on vacation. I can't wait for things to go back to normal is the equivalent of being that like stodgy parent in the 50s who got mad that your kid was listening to rock music.
Oh, yeah, totally.
Like,
Completely.
do you want to be on the wrong side of history? Because that's where you are right now.
Yeah, do you want to be like scandalized by Elvis's hips?
Yeah, yeah. But it's like the irony of this whole thing is that like a lot of times in the past when we've seen people be on the wrong side of history and being stodgy and stubborn and old-timey, it's because they were old. But I see like 25-year-olds, 30-year-olds, 35-year-olds doing this bullshit right now. And I'm just like, God, you seem like such a dinosaur to me now. Like I just you're like not part of this new world we're going to have when this is over.
Yeah.
I don't know. There you go. Now you guys know how judgy I am.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's true. Like I think I personally have been like throughout my experience, like of the life of being an adult and like kind of having come out into the world during a recession and having sort of been in the swim and navigated like all these sort of like pitfalls of the gig quote unquote economy and like being in the Bay Area where there's a lot of the like disruption for disruption's sake, or like, I mean, really just creating this kind of bizarro world where everybody just like sits at home and like has shit done for them. Like I was listening to a podcast ad for like one of those services that does grocery shopping for you. I don't know, there's like a few of them. But what really struck me about the ad was that it reminded me of those old TaskRabbit ads that there used to be, where it was basically like, hey, get someone else to do this thing for you so that you have more time to, like, one of the examples was literally like, use a filter on your phone to see how you'd look with bangs. And I'm like, is that really like, that's what you like that's why you need someone to do this thing for you so that you have more time to like
oh my God, that is so gross.
It's so gross. And it's just like, is this real? Like, is this not just a huge, can you not see what like a preposterous joke that is?
Oh God, I hate everyone, like I said. So we've been recording for almost 3 hours now.
We have. You've got your work cut out for you.
I know. I definitely do. Is there any last parting thoughts you would like to leave with our listeners as our special guest?
Oh,
no pressure or anything.
Yeah, I mean, I think how I'm personally trying to live with this and kind of like just alter my behavior, or I think for me it's really about being present, which is like a very loaded sort of wellness word or whatever. but I do think there's really something to it, because I think when you're like living in the here and now of what's happening, you have that kind of perceptive ability where you can look at what you're seeing and like see it for what it is, instead of being sort of like dazzled and glamored by all of like the flim flam and the smoke and mirrors, which have really just been having a field day for so long. Yeah, I don't know. I think I'm about like things that feel like authentic and real, and if what that looks like is like spending a lot of time with my cats, like that doesn't cost a thing. I don't know.
Right. Oh, I love that. I think that's really important.
And the other thing I was going to say really quickly, just for like my advice to people who are like trying to build, build an aesthetic that feels like fresh and like they're expressing themselves, while also not kind of like falling into the trap of all of the hoopla around it, is, I told you this in one of the text messages, like I think it's a really fun thought experiment to like people make avatars of themselves all the time on their phones and for various things. Like,
Mm-hmm.
what if, like, you were, like, a comic book character? And, comic book characters, like, pretty much always wear the same thing, like Jughead or Veronica or whatever. Um, obviously, or the Silver Surfer, he always wears the same thing. But, like, what if you were? Like, what would that look like? And then really you don't need to buy that much shit, because once you reach a certain, like, number of objects of clothing, like enough clothing that you can, like, wear something different each day of the week and then wash it, then you're just getting into volume, you know?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Like,
Yeah.
what is, like, the core of you? And rather than trying to get, like, 19 different versions of riffs on that thing, just get, like, really that thing, and then it's so what if, like, if you become the person who's, like, always wearing, like, fanciful leggings, or like whatever your thing is, like, there's no shame in, like, having a thing that other people aren't into. Like, you don't have to look like everyone else. Like, I think it really is about just, like, finding what feels, like, appropriate to, like, how you want to feel in your clothes, and, like, how you like the idea of yourself looking. And, like, that is what style is, like,
Mm-hmm.
when you see
Mm-hmm.
those, like, real old ladies in New York who aren't wearing anything that you'd see on a runway or in a Hot Topic or in, a Forever 21, but everybody is just, like, drooling over them because they're so stylish, they just don't care what anyone thinks. Like, that's the key, I think, is to, like, find what works for you. And once you do, I think the rest sort of follows. But I think it's a matter of, like, sort of, like, honing in on how your identity kind of, like, crosses and crosshatches with what your clothing is.
Right. Right. Figure out who you are and just run with that.
Yeah, for real.
Trends are just tools to make you buy things. So you don't need to think about that. Think about who you want to be, who you are right now, who you want the world to think you are. But don't go out there and think you have to be thin and rich and wearing expensive clothing.
Well, and that was the other thing I was just about to touch on, is, like, I think it begins with fit is really key, because, like, when we talk about,
Mhm.
like, tailoring and things like that, like, many's the time there's been a piece of clothing that, like, theoretically I think is cool, or I think I would love, and then I put it on my body, and it's just, like, you gotta know, like, what your body, like, you have to, like, live reality on reality's terms with your body and be like, like, and there's all sorts of, I mean, obviously people do, like, aspire to be more fit. People aspire, and ideally that should be, like, the only real reason you're, like, changing your diet or your exercise, is because you want to, like, feel healthier or you want to feel stronger. It shouldn't be about how you end up looking. That should be secondary. But the
Mhm.
truth is, like, like, you've had people on, like, your friend who did fit, like, sometimes you, like, look pretty regular, but your, like, butt is strangely disproportionately small or large or whatever. And there's clothing for that. There's such a plethora of clothing that you can, like, find the thing that, like, is satisfactory on, like, work with what you've got. And then that,
Mhm.
like, that naturally becomes stylish because people see it and they're like, "Oh, their clothes just look like they look comfortable in those clothes." Like, they look like they can, like, perform tasks and also,
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
there's, like, a little more going into it than just purely utilitarian. Or if, like, purely utilitarian is your kink, then just, like, ride it.
Yeah, yeah, and if there is something that you find that you're like, "Okay, this doesn't fit my body, but I am obsessed with this and this is who I am," get it tailored,
Yeah.
because when you get it fitted to you, it becomes almost custom for you,
Mhm.
and you're gonna keep it a lot longer.
Yeah, you're gonna have such a relationship with that garment, and I think that's also,
You
like,
are.
I mean, it's too late in the game to start talking about, like, relationships in this field of, like, talking about the things and, like, the binging and the purging and the regret, and, like,
Yes.
but all, like, it's true though, like, it's like, if you think of, like, fast fashion, it's like a unsatisfactory one night stand that then just kind of, like, sits in a corner of your room and haunts you.
I know, it's true, like, what if you picked up some guy at brunch because you had too many bottomless mimosas, and you brought him home, and it was all around kind of unsatisfactory? Uh what if he then stayed there in the corner or in your closet for 6 months?
Ghost.
Yeah.
That's how it feels though. Whereas what if there's someone and you meet them and you jive and it just, everything just feels real good. And then yeah, you do want to wear that every day, or you do want to wear that or something just like it, or the things that just feel like your family. You do spend probably more time with your clothes than you do with maybe your partner. So shouldn't you feel as attached to them as you do to your partner? I think so.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. Well, thank you so much, Gillian. This was so fun.
Thank you for having me, Amanda. This has been fun.
Thanks again to Gillian for being a lovely friend and the best person I can imagine to join me in this dialogue about consumerism and, dropping acid on election day to get all these insights for us. Hopefully we'll get to have her back again sometime soon. I hope you will take her idea of dressing as your own comic book character to heart, because as I was editing this episode and listening to our conversation again, it made me think a lot about my character. I guess she would wear a lot of puff sleeve maxi and midi dresses, usually printed, a big hat, some practical shoes, of course, a huge crystal necklace. That's who I am. And when I've tried to say, oh, I'm going to get into jeans now, or maybe I'm minimalist, both of these have happened, it just felt like a costume, and I never wore that stuff again. I ended up selling it on Poshmark or just kind of sitting on it until the next time I moved, and then I gave it away. In a world full of trends and infinite numbers of clothes, shoes, and accessories, it's kind of nice to have some goalposts that are emblazoned with your name. And the only things that get to go through there are the ones that fit with your character. It's almost like, wait a minute. Part of being better consumers, of being conscious consumers, is understanding ourselves better. I think I'm onto something here. Thanks for listening to another episode of Clotheshorse. Just a reminder to check out the Clotheshorse Buy Better Holiday Pledge on Instagram. If you plan on buying gifts, and seriously, you do not have to, please remember how powerful your money is. So spend it where it makes a difference. Buy from local small businesses or buy secondhand. I know that the smaller businesses can be a lot harder to find on your own because, they don't have big marketing budgets. They're not serving you tons of Instagram ads every day. So once again, I'm just going to shout out Gooder Gift Guide. That's Gooder Gift Guide on Instagram. They launched on Black Friday. They've been sharing all kinds of suggestions from small businesses all over, and basically for every kind of gift recipient that you can imagine. So check them out. And remember, the best gifts don't come from assholes. If you like what you're hearing, please rate and review on Apple Podcasts. You are probably already reciting that along with me. Also, tell your friends. You know what? We're so close to 10,000 downloads, which is such a big deal. I'm so excited. So clearly all of your recommendations are paying off. All of your awesome friends are binging and then telling their friends. So let's keep up the good work. I'm planning a special giveaway. It's inspired by my conversation with Gillian. And when we cross that threshold, I'll be sharing some details with you about what it is and how you can be a part of it. Thank you to everyone who has shared our content or recommended us on Instagram. I'm not kidding, where one post this week had so many likes and so many shares that Instagram thought I was buying followers and likes, and they disabled our account for a while. Isn't that crazy? So if you messaged me on Instagram in the past few days and you didn't get a response, it probably just didn't come to me. There's all kinds of weird stuff going on with my notifications. So just write me again. I promise I'll get right back to you. By the way, if you ever want me to share a source for the information I'm providing here or on the Instagram, as always, I've got you. I have it all stacked up, virtually, in my bookmarks folder. And so if you need that information just to, convince someone else of the information, or for a paper for school, or just because you want to read some new stuff, just reach out to me and I will share it all with you. Do you have some feedback, an episode idea? Do you want to be a guest on Clotheshorse? Drop me a line at clothehorsepodcast@gmail.com. Or like I said, you can DM me via Instagram at clothehorsepodcast. And if you have a question, no matter how complicated or confusing or huge it is, hit me up because I love a research project. If you want to meet other Clotheshorse listeners, join the Clotheshorsing Around Facebook group, and I'll share a link to that in the show notes too. We've been sharing some interesting stuff lately and having a conversation about Lolita culture and how consumerist it is. So you don't want to miss out. And I'm just going to say it again. Don't forget the Clotheshorse hotline. It's the best thing ever. The phone number is 717-925-7417. Give me a call, even if you just want to say hi, talk about something the show made you think about. Those are kind of my favorite messages. Ask me a question, tell me what you're doing for the holidays, tell me a story, talk about your collections. I love it when you call me, so do it. And if you just can't get enough of hearing me talk, I mean, who couldn't, right? Don't forget to check out The Department. I co-host it with my friend Kim, and we talk about trends, taste, all kinds of super weird and funny stories. This week is part 2 of our Tragic Trends deep dive, and it's about #girlboss, which we both have a lot of personal experience with, so check it out. I think you're going to love it. I think it's a great way to jump into The Department. Thanks, as always, to Dustin Travis Way for our music and audio support.